Welcome to today's deep dive. We've got some articles here about Intel, and things seem pretty dramatic. Stock plunges, leadership shakeups, even calls for prayer.
Yeah, it's definitely a pivotal moment for Intel, no doubt about it. We're going to be exploring what's behind all these changes and what they might mean for, well, the company's future.
Okay, let's get into it. The big headline is Pat Gelsinger's exit as CEO.
Right.
The board abruptly lost confidence in him. It's pretty unusual to see that happen at a company like Intel. What happened?
It boils down to performance. Gelsinger might have had a vision, but Intel's stock took a nosedive, 58% this year alone?
Wow.
While competitors like NVIDIA are, well, they're flourishing, especially in data centers and AI.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if those general purpose chips that Intel's known for are, I don't know, maybe losing their appeal.
Could be. For investors, it's a major warning sign.
Definitely a wake-up call for Intel. And Gelsinger's response to leaving, let's just say it's not your typical CEO move, calling for, prayer and fasting for all 100,000 Intel employees.
It is unconventional, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But Gelsinger is known for his strong religious beliefs. And this, well, this reflects that.
I guess it raises questions about, the role of personal faith in the corporate world.
Definitely sparked some debate.
It really makes you think. But let's zoom out a little. What's been happening at Intel that led to these problems in the first place?
They've been facing some strong headwinds, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Falling behind in chip manufacturing tech, particularly in those really advanced processes needed to create the most powerful chips and the most efficient ones.
And you can see the impact on their bottom line. Intel had to make some tough choices, like laying off 15% of their workforce
Right.
and cutting billions in spending. That's got to be hard on those employees.
Yeah. Those cuts are definitely a sign of a company trying to right itself. Painful, but probably necessary.
So Gelsinger's out. Who's going to lead Intel through all this? What's the plan for finding a new CEO?
The board's looking, and get this, they're open to candidates from outside the company. That's a big change for Intel. Traditionally, they promote from within. They're even looking at people from companies like Marvell Technology.
Wow. It shows how seriously they're taking all of this. It's not just maintaining the status quo. They're looking for a real shakeup.
Exactly. Recognizing they need a fresh outlook, maybe a totally different approach to leadership.
Fascinating. We'll have to wait and see who they pick. But even though he's gone, Gelsinger's still speaking up for Intel, especially about their latest semiconductor process, pushing back against all that criticism about their yield rates.
Right. That's the percentage of usable chips from each wafer.
Yeah.
He's arguing that just focusing on the yield rates is, well, it's misleading. He says that Intel's new process, even though the yields are lower at first, it's more complex. Ultimately, it'll create chips that are more powerful, more energy efficient.
So there's a lot at stake here. Intel's future could depend on it.
It really could.
It feels like a story of leadership change, technological hurdles, and, a company battling to stay on top in a world that's constantly changing. But what does it mean for the rest of us? Why should we, the everyday tech users, care about what's happening at Intel?
Well, think about it. Intel's chips are, well, they're everywhere. Our laptops, our smartphones, even our cars these days. Their performance, it directly affects all the tech we rely on.
True. So Intel's fate has a big impact on the whole tech ecosystem.
Yeah. If they falter, we could see slower innovation, prices going up, and fewer choices for consumers. But if they can turn things around, who knows? Could lead to all sorts of amazing tech advancements for everyone.
Definitely a story worth keeping an eye on. But there's another layer to this, and it's Gelsinger's call for prayer. What a fascinating twist. It really raises questions about where faith fits in with company culture.
It's definitely a unique situation.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how Gelsinger's, his very personal response to leaving impacts the conversation about faith and leadership, especially in tech. It adds a human dimension to a story that often feels like it's all about numbers and technical stuff.
Right. Reminds us there are actual people behind these giant companies, people with their own beliefs and values that, well, they shape how they act. This story, it's more than just chips and stock prices. It's about the human side of technology, and that's what makes it so captivating.
Absolutely. We've just scratched the surface here in part one of our deep dives. There's so much more to unpack. It really is amazing how much discussion Gelsinger's call for prayer has caused. It makes you think about personal beliefs and work life, especially in a field like tech where, the stakes are so high.
Yeah, definitely a unique part of this whole thing. Makes you wonder how his faith might have affected, well, how he led Intel while he was there.
That's a good question. It's hard to say for sure without, being in the inner circle. But it's interesting to consider. Some people might say that his faith could have given him a strong sense of purpose, and focus on values in his leadership.
Right, but you could also see it as maybe blurring the lines between, I don't know, personal beliefs and company decisions, especially in a situation as critical as this one.
Yeah, no easy answers there. But it definitely adds another layer to all of this. How individual beliefs and values can impact a company's culture and choices, especially when things are changing.
True, it reminds us there's a human side to all of this, but let's dive a little deeper into the problems Intel's facing. We know they're behind in chip manufacturing technology, but for those of us who aren't, engineers, can you explain what that actually means?
Sure, imagine it like this. Building a chip, it's kind of like building a skyscraper. The more complex the design, the better tools and techniques you need. Intel's been great at building those complex skyscrapers, so to speak. Those powerful general-purpose chips in so many of our devices. But they've hit a snag in making even more intricate designs, specifically what's called the nodes. It's how they measure the size of transistors on a chip.
Okay, so smaller nodes mean more transistors, which means more powerful and efficient chips, right?
Exactly. And that's where companies like TSMC are winning. They've figured out how to build chips with these super tiny nodes. So their chips end up being more powerful and using less energy than what Intel has right now.
And that's why TSMC's got an advantage in areas like data centers and AI. Those places need those smaller, more efficient chips.
Right on. Companies like NVIDIA, who are designing chips for those markets, they've teamed up with TSMC to actually make their designs, which just makes TSMC's position as the leader in this advanced chip manufacturing even stronger.
So Intel's trying to catch up in a race where the finish line keeps moving further away. What can they even do at this point?
Well, there are a few options. One, they could go all in on their own manufacturing, invest a ton in research and development to catch up with TSMC. That would be expensive and take time, but it would let them control, their whole production process.
Sounds pretty risky, but could have a big payoff. What else could they do?
They could partner with a company like TSMC itself, to manufacture their own designs. It would give them access to the most advanced tech, but, they'd be giving up some control and sharing the profits.
That's a tough call. And to make choices like that, they need the right person in charge. Which brings us back to the search for a new CEO. What qualities do they need in a candidate, considering all these challenges?
They need someone who really gets the semiconductor industry, someone who can find that balance between, pushing for innovation and dealing with the realities of actually making those chips. And they need someone who can inspire the people working there and get investors excited about Intel again.
That's a lot to ask. Think they'll find someone like that inside the company? Or will they have to go outside?
Well, that's the big question. Intel's always promoted from within. But the fact that they're even thinking about outsiders, it suggests they might be ready for a big change in leadership style. Someone from outside might bring new ideas, be more willing to, shake things up in a way that someone from inside might not.
I can't wait to see who they choose. It'll definitely tell us a lot about where they see themselves going. But even with a new CEO, it's not going to be a quick fix. What are some of the biggest hurdles they'll face in getting back on track?
One of the biggest. Catching up on the manufacturing tech. It takes a lot of money and time. And TSMC is not just waiting around. They're still innovating, pushing the limits of chip design.
So it's not enough for Intel to just catch up, is it? They have to actually get ahead.
Right. It's a race they can't afford to just, keep pace in. They got to surpass TSMC to really be competitive again.
What about the people working at Intel? We've talked about the layoffs and how that might affect morale. How do they deal with all of that?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. You can't overlook that. Keeping your best people and attracting new talent is key in tech, right?
Yeah.
It's such a competitive field. They've got to build a culture where people want to work, where they feel inspired.
Sounds like they've got a lot on their plate. Technological challenges, financial ones, even cultural ones. But Gelsinger's still optimistic about Intel, even though he's leaving. He keeps defending their new tech, saying it's a game changer, even though those early yields are lower.
It's an interesting take. He's basically saying, don't focus on the short-term numbers. Look at what it could be in the long run. Pretty bold. We'll see if he's right.
It's a gamble, for sure, betting on a technology that hasn't really, proven itself yet.
It is. And that gamble is really going to decide Intel's future. If their new tech works the way they think it will, it could put them back on top. But if it doesn't, they might end up stuck following the leaders instead of being one.
So many questions. Will the new CEO make the right choices? Will this technology pay off? Will they be able to hold on to the people they need to compete?
It's a story full of unknowns, but also, full of potential.
Mm.
Intel's got a long history of innovating. They've faced tough times before. The real question is, can they do it again?
Hmm.
Especially in the tech world where, things are always changing so fast.
It's a question that'll be answered over the next few months and years, that's for sure. But the stakes are high, no doubt about it.
Absolutely. The decisions they make now will impact a lot of things, not just Intel, but the whole tech world, and maybe even all of us who use the technology they help to create.
It really is like watching a tightrope walk, isn't it? One misstep and, well, the consequences could be huge.
Yeah, definitely. And with so much at stake, if Intel succeeds or fails, it could have a ripple effect, throughout the whole tech world. Like, it could impact everything from how much our devices cost to how quickly things advance, in fields like AI, cloud computing,
Yeah.
all of that.
It just shows you how connected everything is in tech, right? Like, one company struggles and it creates opportunities for others or even changes the whole industry.
Exactly. And Intel, well, them having problems has given companies like TSMC and NVIDIA a chance to, really take the lead. It happens so fast in this industry.
Makes you wonder if we're seeing I don't know, like a changing of the guard in the chip world. I mean, for years, it was Intel all the way. Now, well, it feels like anyone's game.
Could be, but I wouldn't, completely write Intel off just yet. They've got a lot of talented engineers, a strong brand, and, a history of innovation. Can they use all of that to adapt? That's the big question.
It's a make or break moment for sure. And like we've been talking about, their choice of a new CEO is so important. They need someone who not only gets the tech, but can also, steer the ship through these rough waters.
Absolutely. Someone to inspire the employees, bring back investor confidence, and, well, make those tough choices to get Intel back on top. It's a tall order, but having the right leader could really make the difference.
It shows how much leadership matters, especially in a crisis. The decisions at the top, they really shape where a company goes.
For sure. And it's not just about picking the right technologies. It's also about the company culture. Encouraging people to innovate, work together, and be willing to, well, to take some risks.
It's about having a team that can handle the tough times and come out stronger. Speaking of tough times, let's go back to Gelsinger's call for prayer for a second. Such a surprising reaction to a business problem. What do you think about faith and leadership, especially in a situation like this?
It definitely makes you think. I mean, when he asked everyone to pray, it really got people talking about, where personal beliefs fit in at work.
Mhm.
Some people saw it as genuine, like he was concerned for his former coworkers. Others, well, they thought it was out of place, in a business setting.
It definitely mixed the personal and the professional, but it also made the whole story more human. Reminded us that, these aren't just big faceless corporations. It's people, individuals with, well, with their own beliefs and values.
It's a good reminder that those human factors, they really do influence a company's culture and, the choices they make.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into all the ups and downs at Intel, what's the main takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about as they follow this story, in the future?
The biggest thing, the tech world never stands still. What's on top today could be old news tomorrow.
And what seems impossible? Well, it might be the norm someday.
It's a world where you have to adapt, innovate, and, well, be ready for change if you want to survive.
And it's a world where, that human element is so important. What leaders decide, how creative engineers are, what employees want to achieve, all of that shapes what's next.
So what can our listeners do to keep up in a world that's always changing?
I'd say stay curious. Keep learning. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And, keep exploring the world of tech.
Because the story of technology is still being written, and you have a part in what happens next. Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Intel's, well, they're interesting times, let's say. It's definitely not over, and we'll keep you updated on, on what happens next.
We will. And to our listeners, thanks for diving deep with us. Until next time, keep exploring.